Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, I'm David Kramer here with the Alaska Weather. As always, please visit our website at arh.noaa.gov. Get any updates to our forecast through that means, or any watches, warnings, advisories that we may have out for the state. You can also call in on our weather info line at 1-800-472-0391. Get updates to the forecast through that means as well. And you can follow us on both Twitter and on Facebook. Starting off today, we'll take a quick look at the two warnings that we have out for the state, and those are both way up north. One is for the central Beaufort Sea coastline, and the other is for northeastern Brooks Range. And those are flood warnings that are out until 9:30 p.m. tonight, and they are for the Kuparuk River. So if you want additional information on that or any updates, again, please check our website. Switching up a little bit, we'll take a look at Pavlov Volcano. This erupted 2 days ago and has had ash primarily between 10 and 16,000 feet, and that is continuing even today. There was a puff not too long ago that went up to right around 22,000 feet. That is not the norm, though. That was pretty rare, but a lot of ash and steam going up anywhere between 10 and 16,000 feet for the most part. This picture was taken from Cold Bay looking across to Pavlov Volcano, and that's during the day. That was around noon today. Thanks to Robert Stacy for that one. And then we had another one overnight that is coming from Cold Bay as well, and you can see it really starting to flare up there with the red showing up on the image really well, but you can also see some of the ash starting to go off. It's a little bit darker there, but going off to the right of our picture. Moving on, we have our fire danger for the state, primarily in the interior, pretty strong there, extending down into the Copper River Basin and up as far north as the upper Yukon Valley, and then down into parts of the Kuskokwim Valley as well. If you're in any of those areas, be mindful of the fire danger with the fuels on the ground there. Taking a look now at our satellite imagery, we'll start off in the southeast part of the state. We have low pressure moving through, bringing some rain to areas along the panhandle there. And as we watch this again, you can start to see some of the cloud cover there really start to clear up and push off back over Canada. We have another low moving through part of the south central, moving more towards the Yakutat area, bringing some rain showers to those areas as well. Starting to look out to the west, we'll notice a little bit different circulation out here over the northern parts of the Bering Sea, moving around in a clockwise direction. That's because that's high pressure moving in over the Bering Sea with some lower clouds, the darker color there underneath that, some stratus and fog associated with that high pressure. So you look one more time way down to the south, we can see low pressure moving across towards the western Aleutian Islands, and it's kind of drifting now more to the south and east, but still bringing some cloud cover and some rain to the areas way out there near Shimia. Taking a look now at our weather for the remainder of today. We have that low bringing in southerly flow to the western Aleutian Islands with some rain expected there, but this low itself is starting to move off to the south and east. Then out over the Bering Sea, we have our high pressure with some areas of fog underneath that extending out into the western Bering Sea. Not a whole lot of activity along the rest of the Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula, but as we get along the coastline in the YK Delta and Bristol Bay area, seeing some isolated showers there, and it's some more showers near the Iliamna area. Up through the other parts of the west coast, we have some showers along the coastline, continuing up to around the Point Hope area, and as we get further to the north, transitioning over to become snow showers around Barrow and Dead Horse. Moving down into the Brooks Range and western parts of the interior, not a whole lot of activity right now. But for the eastern parts, with those multiple little weaker waves moving through, we have some showers extending down from the Eagle area down into the Brooks Range and other places around the south central or the Alaska Range. And then as we move closer to the Panhandle, we have some showers in the northern parts extending closer towards Yakutat. Moving into the tonight period, those rain showers are going to spread further to the south and get a little bit stronger in the more northern locations, extending out towards Yakutat once again. Lighter showers throughout much of the south central, extending up the eastern parts of the interior, and as we get closer to the Brooks Range, starting to mix with snow up there and becoming all snow by the time we get closer to Dead Horse. Fog all the way along the coastline, Arctic coast, down along the west coast of the state and into the Bering Sea, with our high pressure extending out through much of those areas. We also have some rain showers, especially around the Norton Sound area and places further to the south into the YK Delta and Bristol Bay regions. Then along the Aleutian Islands, seeing more of that fog there with just some isolated rain showers near the central Aleutian Islands for tonight. As we move into Tuesday, we can really see our lows starting to push off to the south, but we will see some rain showers extending through much of the Aleutian Islands and then places along the Alaska Peninsula as well. High pressure getting a little weaker here now, but we are still seeing a lot of fog underneath that, extending down towards the Pribilof Islands. And then places along the southern parts of the Norton Sound, some isolated rain showers there, and additionally some showers up there by Point Hope. For the rest of the coastline, not going to see a whole lot of activity even along the Arctic slope, and we do have some high pressure moving in there as well. Then along the eastern parts of the interior, extending down from the upper Yukon Valley down into the Alaska Range, isolated rain showers, especially in the afternoon hours, and the potential of some isolated thunderstorms as we get further to the east, right along the border with Canada there. Down in the south central, not going to see a whole lot of showery activity there, but as we move into places along the Panhandle, expecting to see rain showers extending up all throughout to the Yakutat area. Then finally on Wednesday, starting to clear up in the Panhandle with the exception of way to the south, going to see some isolated rain showers there. Along the south central, not a whole lot of activity. That's true for much of the interior as well, with the exception once again of way out east along the border. Going to see some isolated rain showers extending up into the eastern parts of the Brooks Range. Out along the Arctic coast, nothing way out to the east, but as we push further to the west, going to start to see some rain showers closer to Barrow and then starting to transition over to a mix of rain and snow as we get closer to the Point Hope area, down along the west coast of the state into the southwestern part of the state. Not going to see any rain for Wednesday, but our high pressure still lingering out over the northern Bering Sea, providing some fog underneath that. Down in the Aleutian Islands, starting off west, we have some isolated rain showers extending further to the east, and then as we get over the eastern Aleutian Islands into the Alaska Peninsula, going to see some rain there, coming up with another low, moving up with a warm front coming from the south. As we move into our temperatures, starting off in the Panhandle, temperatures in the low 50s, getting into the mid 50s as we get further to the south. Then in the south central, in the lower to mid 50s there. Colder as we get off to the east. Valdez 48 degrees, Cordova 49 degrees, and 49 for Glen Allen as well. Moving up this afternoon, we had in the interior warmer temperatures in the low 50s out to the west as we push further to the east, dropping down into the mid to upper 40s there. Colder through the past 39 degrees, and then as we get along the Arctic coastline, staying right around freezing for most locations. Coldest there at Barrow, 27 degrees, Dead Horse, 34 degrees. Down in the Kotzebue Sound area, mid 30s to mid 40s there, 39 at Kotzebue. Down in the Norton Sound area in the upper 30s on the northern side, on the southern side in the mid 40s. Down in the YK Delta area, mid 40s there as well, with Bethel at 45 and Antioch 46 degrees. Down in the Bristol Bay area, mid 40s for most locations, a little bit colder as we get closer to Togiak, 39 degrees there. Then down in the Alaska Peninsula, Cold Bay 51 degrees, Sand Point 50 degrees. Then moving along the Aleutian Islands in the mid 40s, dropping down to the lower 40s as we get closer to Shemya. St. Paul 45 degrees and St. George 42 degrees. Taking us into our low temperatures for tonight, staying right around 40 degrees throughout much of the Aleutian Islands. St. Paul getting a little bit colder there, dropping down to 37 degrees tonight. In the lower to mid 40s in the Alaska Peninsula, and in pretty similar conditions for much of the rest of the Bristol Bay area. YK Delta, upper 30s to lower 40s there. Warmer as we get further inland, 42 degrees expected low tonight for Antioch. Hooper Bay, 38 expected low. And we get up closer to the Seward Peninsula area, mid 30s to upper 30s there. Nome getting down to 37 degrees. As we move up along the Arctic coastline, dropping below 30 degrees, with Barrow getting down to 27 degrees expected low tonight. And that'll continue through much of the Brooks Range, with Arctic Village getting down to 36 degrees. Then going to stay a little bit warmer in the interior, right around 40 degrees there, with Fairbanks getting down to 41 degrees tonight. Bettles 37 degrees, and then taking us down into the south central, dropping down into the mid 40s, a little bit colder as we get further to the south, the upper 30s there, with Seward getting down to 38 degrees, Valdez down to 39, but Cordova right by the water staying a little bit warmer, only down to 43 degrees tonight. Down in the southeastern part of the state, dropping down into the mid-40s for almost all locations. Haines getting down to 46 tonight. Yakutat a little bit colder, down to 40 degrees. Highs for tomorrow getting up into the mid-40s. Warmer as we get further to the south, upper 50s there. And then as we move into the south central part of the state, getting up to around 60 degrees for the Seward area. Warmer as we get further to the north in the mid-60s there. Talkeetna 65 degrees, Glen Allen 64 degrees. In the interior into the lower to mid-60s there, but colder as we get closer to the Brooks Range, Arctic Village, and through the pass. 51 degrees expected highs for tomorrow, and even colder as we get along the Arctic coastline, staying in the upper 30s there. Taking us over to the Kotzebue Sound area, we are going to see temperatures getting to the mid-40s to mid-50s. And then in the Norton Sound area, mid-40s to right around 50 there. Nome getting up to 46 degrees tomorrow. Down around 60 degrees for highs in the YK Delta and Bristol Bay area. A little bit warmer there, King Salmon 63 degrees expected high tomorrow. Lower to mid-50s in the Alaska Peninsula. Then throughout the Aleutian Islands, getting colder as we get further off to the west until we get to the lower 40s as we get over towards the Shemya area. 41 degrees expected high for St. Paul tomorrow. As we look into the flying weather for tomorrow, we have widespread MVFR and IFR conditions underneath that high pressure with all the fog there, and then the rain being brought in by that other low, bringing in some IFR conditions to the central and eastern Aleutian Islands. MVFR conditions also along the Arctic coast in some areas in the eastern parts of the interior, and in the northern parts of the Alaska Panhandle, we are going to see some MVFR conditions there, primarily in the morning hours. Looking through the passes now, Anaktuvuk should be VFR throughout the day. Adigan Pass should also be VFR for tomorrow. Lake Clark and Merrill both going to be VFR tomorrow. Rainy Pass should also remain VFR throughout the day, as well as Windy Pass and Isabel Pass. Fantastic Pass also expected to be VFR tomorrow. Tanita Pass, VFR conditions expected tomorrow, as well as at Portage. And Chilkoot and White are both going to start off in VFR and then improve to VFR as we progress throughout the day tomorrow. Taking a look now at our freezing levels, we have our surface freezing line coming in and staying right by the Brooks Range throughout much of the northern part of the state. As we look further off to the west, we have a tongue of warmer air coming in with that flow a little bit more southerly, bringing in some warmer air there to parts of the Aleutian Islands and into the Bering Sea. Let's take a look at our icing. We are expecting throughout much of the western Bering Sea, extending into the northern parts and along much of the west coast of the state above 10,000 feet there. And then as we move out over the southeastern part of the state above 10,000 feet, extending close to the south central for our icing tomorrow. Taking a look now at our jet stream, the main part of the flow going into the state is out of a westerly direction, 60 knots there coming into the northern part of the state. Stronger piece of the jet, 100 knots staying to the south, but pretty close to Kodiak Island and exiting off to the east. And then further to the south, we have another low that's bringing in a jet of 80 knots, getting up to as high as 125 knots, but pretty far south of the Aleutian Islands. Taking us down to 9,000 feet, you can see our main high pressure system flow around that, getting anywhere from 25 to 30 knots. Stronger over the Aleutian Islands, some of that more southerly air coming up with that. Anywhere from 30 to 40 knots there, continuing up into around this high pressure, getting as high as 40 knots, and then coming across the state, seeing more northerly flow, primarily 10 to 15 knots, but getting a little bit stronger as we get further to the south, 20 knots there, and then out over that western part of the state, seeing 25 knots out of a northerly direction. Low pressure sitting over the southeast at this level, and we're seeing flow 20 knots coming out of the east, becoming 35 as it exits off from a westerly direction to the south. As we drop down to 3,000 feet, flow out of a northerly direction here, 10 to 15 knots, staying that way, but veering off a little bit more towards the east as we get into the Gulf of Alaska. So look over the western part of the state, continuing to see our high pressure even at this level, and anywhere from 10 to 25 knots, strongest on that southwestern side of the high. We're seeing that southerly flow continuing 35 to 40 knots there, and that becomes important with the turbulence we're expecting to see along the Aleutian Islands with those stronger winds coming in over the islands. Then up over the northern part of the state, southwesterly flow around 20 knots there, weaker as we get closer towards Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula. So we will look at our turbulence now below 4,000 feet, extending from the western Aleutian Islands all the way to the eastern Aleutian Islands, and that's due to those stronger winds that we're seeing from the south, bringing in and interacting with that terrain there. So that turbulence is expected below 4,000 feet. And then just off the Bering Strait, we are going to see below 5,000 feet there, some moderate turbulence as well. But we can look over the rest of mainland Alaska, and we're not going to see a whole lot of activity, a lot of weaker winds throughout the state, and that includes a lot of places in the Panhandle as well. And we'll be back shortly with the marine forecast.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of Alaska Public Media and the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation, welcome back to Hangar Flying. This evening, our guest is Dan Billman. Dan is with Flight Standards Division of the FAA and a longtime Alaskan pilot. In fact, Dan started flying at West High here in Anchorage and got his private just about the time he graduated from West High. Dan, it's a real pleasure to have you.
Thank
Welcome
you,
to the
Harry.
program.
Good to see you.
Well, let's start there. It sounds like at one time there was an effective ground and flight school program in the Anchorage School District.
It was great. We had a private ground school, aviation science class, and even an Arctic survival class right in high school. And then also a flying lab. One or more of the teachers at West were involved in Merrill Flight Service also. And somehow they managed to put this program together, and it was great. It was reasonable cost and for flying the aircraft. So I was able to get quite a few hours towards my private before I graduated from high school. And then I think within 20 days or so, I was a private pilot.
You know, Dan, I was talking to someone else, I think it was today, said that West wasn't the only high school with a program like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the other schools, what programs they had, but I'm sure there were some others. And then, of course, after high school, I went into the Aviation Administration program at UAA. So it was hard to beat.
Well, you certainly have a distinguished career in aviation. Started out with BLM as a mechanics helper and on to flying DC-3s and the Argosy, and you started Alaska Air Ventures and were flying 185 Cubs and Beavers, so been all part of your life, huh?
Yeah, I always felt that we were the chosen one. Our family just, we saw so many sites up in the Copper River Basin. We always had airplanes parked in the yard, and not only was it a great business for us, but it was great recreation for our whole family. And then we also had a flying service on the Big Island.
I want to come back to that. Actually, I want to have you back, and we'll talk about that as a program in itself. But what I want to do before I get too far into this program is I want to talk about the Pancake Breakfast, which is an annual event sponsored by the FAA and coming up this Saturday. Can you talk a little bit about times and locations?
Yeah, at 8 o'clock on June 7th, the doors will open at the New Horizon hangar. The New Horizon hangar is on that south west apron up at Palmer. And those folks have been very generous sharing that facility with us for many years. So the doors will open. There'll be pancakes, sausage, and a great breakfast. The mayor of Palmer, Miss Johnson, will welcome the crowd and make some introductions around. And then right after her, Greg Holt, our FAA acting regional administrator, is going to do a briefing on next-gen technologies and where we're going in the future here in Alaska. And then I'll talk about the CTAF changes, the common traffic advisory frequencies that we use in different airports. Out in the valley, there's about 178 airports, and there's been some real confusion in the past of which frequencies should people use to go to different airports. So there's been a work group the last 2 years actually that have been working on that project. We think we have a good plan. We're the flight supplement, the new flight supplement that's coming out will
It just came out on May 29th. I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it'll express that. Page 399 will talk about those changes. we're real excited. We've been briefing folks around the area, and people come to us and say this will save lives. So it's pretty exciting.
Well, it's been very well needed. I think it's been 3 years now that since we had those that spate of mid-airs, including one, or the whole family was killed. So I really applaud the work that's been done on it and look forward to your presentation.
Thank you.
Dan, we're running out of time. We've got about 30 seconds left. So let me remind our audience, we're talking about June 7th, this coming Saturday. Doors open at 8 o'clock.
Yes.
And should be done by, what, 11:30?
Oh, probably around 11 or noon.
Okay.
The whole FAA management team will be there flipping pancakes, so it's a good time to talk to the upper management.
Good.
Flight service is going to talk about some of the breadcrumb technologies and how they're going to incorporate those technologies into a flight plan to assist you.
Okay. I'm going to cut you off there, and I'll tell people to come on out and they can get the details when they're out there. There is no charge, but I would encourage folks to, there'll be cans out there for donations, and I would certainly encourage folks to donate. Come out Saturday and learn a little bit and have some fun. Dan, thanks for being on the program.
Thank you for your efforts.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed tonight's program. Remember the pancake breakfast, and until then, fly safe.
Welcome back. We'll take a quick look at the ice edge now. We can see that we have a lot of clearing now, moving up ice-free waters past the Bering Strait now, but this is pretty typical of our seasonal trend, so expecting that to continue with some winds and waves, especially coming from the south there, bringing in some warmer waters. Taking a look now in the southeast part of the state at our winds and waves, we have northwesterly flow 10 to 15 knots out in the Gulf, and similar flow 10 to 15, but a little bit difference of directions out of primarily westerly direction until we get up north of Juneau there out of the south at 10 knots. Seas in the inside waters 2 to 3 feet and 3 to 7 feet as we get back into the Gulf. Then on Wednesday, flow becoming much more westerly now, 10 to 15 knots out in the Gulf, seas 2 to 5 feet, and then 10 to 15 knots out of a west or northwest direction in the inside waters, and out of a northerly direction north of Juneau, 15 knots there. Moving into the south central, flow primarily out of a northwesterly direction, switching to be a little bit more westerly, 10 to 15 knots for the most part. East of the Barren Islands, though, getting up to as high as 20 knots there, and then variable 10 with 2 to 4 foot seas as we get closer to Kodiak Island. Then on Wednesday, variable flow around 10 knots for much of the locations until we get closer to Kodiak Island. Southeasterly flow 20 knots there with 5 feet for seas, and then easterly flow in Shelikof Strait 15 knots there. For the Alaska Peninsula, we have flow out of a northeasterly or easterly direction, 15 to 25 knots, the strongest near King Cove, with seas on the Pacific side 5 to 7 feet, a little bit lower on the Bering side, 3 to 4 feet there. Then on Wednesday, flow becoming easterly, 15 to 20 knots, strongest seas on the Pacific side once again, getting up to as high as 7 to 8 feet. Taking a look now at the Aleutian Islands, flow easterly throughout the whole area, 25 to 30 knots. Seas highest, however, out to the west, 13 feet at the highest, and then as we get further off to the east, seas only around 6 to 9 feet there. For Wednesday, flow still easterly, way out to the east, 25 knots, but becoming more northeasterly as we push off further to the west, and that extends all the way out towards Shemya, with seas anywhere from 8 to 10 feet, a little bit lower on the northern side of the eastern Aleutian Islands, 6 feet there. Moving up to the west coast of the state, variable flow around St. Matthew Island, 10 knots there. Southwesterly further to the north at 15 knots, and then easterly flow closer to the Pribilof Islands, 10 to 20 knots, strongest as we get out into the Bering Sea with 4 to 5 feet for seas. Then on Wednesday, flow becoming predominantly in north or northeasterly direction, 15 to 25 knots, strongest closer to the Pribilofs again. And then as we get closer towards Gamble, they're out of the west, 15 knots on Wednesday. Up along the Arctic coast, we have southerly flow, 15 to 20 knots, becoming more southeasterly as we get further towards the Beaufort Sea, 15 to 10 knots around there. And then on Wednesday, southeasterly flow continued out east, 15 to 20 knots. And then as we move back towards the west-southwesterly flow, 15 to 20 knots there. Quick recap for tonight's weather. We have high pressure dominating the Bering Sea with widespread fog underneath that extending down to the Aleutian Islands, and we are expecting to see some isolated rain showers for the central Aleutians. As we get closer to the southwest part of the state, along the Alaska Peninsula and along the coastline, going to see some rain showers there. Some of those rain showers extending into the Kuskokwim Valley as well. Pushing up to the north, rain showers extending into southern parts of the Seward Peninsula, but the fog is going to go all the way up the coastline out towards the Arctic coast as well. And then as we get into the Brooks Range, rain showers out west becoming more mixed with snow as we get further to the east, and near Dead Horse expecting to see snow showers for tonight. Eastern parts of the interior expecting to see rain showers extending down into the south central as well. And then as we get closer to the southeast part of the state, a little bit more rain further to the north extending out towards Yakutat, but some more isolated showers in the southern parts of the Panhandle. Looking into Tuesday, more widespread rain throughout much of the Panhandle, extending still towards the Yakutat area. But as we move back over the main part of the state, south central going to be pretty clear, but isolated rain showers all along the eastern parts of the interior with the possibility of some afternoon thunderstorms as we get closer towards the border and near the Eagle area. Up along the Arctic coastline, not going to see a whole lot in terms of precipitation until we get closer to Point Hope, expecting to see some isolated rain showers there. And then on the southern sides of the Norton Sound, expecting to see isolated rain showers there as well. High pressure continues over the northern Bering Sea with areas of fog underneath that extending down towards the Pribilof area. Then along the peninsula and into the Aleutians, we are going to see some rain showers there on Tuesday as well. That takes us into Wednesday, where we have another system bringing up some rain from the south, extending to the Aleutian Islands. Fog throughout the Bering Sea with the high pressure continuing out over there, but much of mainland Alaska not going to see a whole lot of showers except way out east and along the Arctic coast, mixing with snow as we get further to the west. With Alaska Weather, I'm David Kramer. Thanks for being with us tonight.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.